and I had a mortar pipe, a 60 millimeter mortar pipe, and an RPG-7 rocket launcher. That was my weapon, right? And I
Wow.
had a and I had an R4 with 6 magazines. I had 12 60 millimeter mortars in my webbing. I had two rockets on my back, one in the pipe.
Okay, hello everyone. We have our next guest, Alan Kleynhans, and I was just chatting with both Alan and Erkan, and Erkan was saying, "Do you want to start?" And I said, "Yes, I want to start this one because I have a particularly strong connection with Alan, even though he might not feel it the same way, and he might, but I'll explain what that is, and then." Also, Erkan, you said, you and I haven't connected for quite a while, and it's quite interesting in our journey is that both you and I, for what, a year and a half or something like that, we were like, whoo, fucking, I certainly was like all over the fucking place, no mission, no focus, and then it's like we both kind of just gone. And we kind of got into maybe more of a kind of warrior mode, like making shit happen. So yeah, that was an answer to your question there, Alan. But I just want to say like a huge welcome to you. Um, and I think we'll just kick off with the conversation. Uh, Ken, is there anything you want to say just for context, anything to get started?
Yeah, I do actually, because I don't know Alan that well. I mean, I've seen him around. I mean, for me, I have this view of Alan as like he's a legend in the world of personal development. I know there's a very good friends of mine know Alan well, but I don't know Alan that well. And Alan, I just really want to welcome you to the LAL podcast, the Life After Landmark. This is number 5. Did I get that right? Is it number
Yes.
It is
5?
number 5.
It's number 5. And welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself and we'll get started?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the kind words from both of you. And yes, my name is Alan Kleynhans, and I'm very excited to be here. Life After Landmark. I was excited to be added into the group, and I've been trying to keep up. And there's been some really great shares there and some really great posts in that group. And it's very interesting to see what people have, how people's lives have unfolded and evolved since Landmark. And I'm sure we're gonna have a great conversation. So it's great to be here. Thanks, guys.
I want to just kick off and just share with you why you are deeply significant to me and my journey of self-development and my entree point into the Landmark Forum. So it was in 90s. So I did the forum that ended on the 4th of February, which was my 30th birthday of 1997. That was quite pivotal for me. And I guess it must have been January of that year. I went along to an introduction. A friend of mine called Susie Ritalik, I doubt you remember her, but she invited me along. And I was going through a stage in my life where like things weren't, it was not gelling, didn't know where I was going, relationships not working, frustrated, taking a lot of my anger out on my mum. And then she called one day and said, I didn't recognize who I was speaking to because she was so positive and upbeat and so on and so forth. And she gave me some coaching around, stuff happens and you make it mean something. I was like, what the fuck? And I didn't want to do therapy because that was for losers, in my world at the time. And there was really something wrong with you. But I actually thought there was something wrong with me. And I went along to the event, and David Ewer was leading the event. This is as I remember it. The memory is not so reliable as I thought it was. And then he said, anyone want to share? And you put your hand up and you walked to the front of the room and you were like quite clearly emotional. Like you had your head in your hand like that. And David was like, oh, just take your time, just when you're ready. And then you started to share, and immediately I heard your South African accent. And then you shared about, which you'll hopefully give some call to. You shared about your experience of being in the border war during the bad days of apartheid and the South African National Defence Force, and some of the stuff you've been through. And I was riveted. I'd never heard anyone share in that level of detail that was so vulnerable and so vivid. But also, I didn't know that that existed, particularly that men could share like that in front of a group of people and be emotional and still go through the emotion and share. I was like, fuck, I'm in. I don't know where I need to sign, but I need to sign. So thank you.
You know, I don't really remember a lot of that evening. I do remember I was emotional. I do remember that the program that I'd just come off. I can't remember. Was that my advanced course or my forum? That was 96 you're talking about, my advanced course, yeah.
It would have been early, probably January 97 or
yeah. So I just done I did my advanced course. I think it was in my mind it's the end of 96.
It might have been. In fact, it might well have been. Yeah.
Yeah. And but I do remember that I had I invited a bunch of people there, and I shared, and I shared what had opened up for me during the advanced course. And I didn't share in the forum, but I remember the first time I shared in the advanced course. During the course, if I just give some context, I shared during the advanced course, and I remember Johnny 10 stood up at the back of the room on my right, and I was on the left of the room, and there was only about 350 people in the advanced course, and he stood up at the end of my share, and I hadn't even finished really, and he stood up and he started talking. He said, "Oh, I know what kind of person you are. You're one of those white supremacists." And I just stood there and I looked at him, and I just breathed, and I thought, just relax, and then he finished talking, and then I said, "Listen, mate, if I was in your shoes, I'd probably think the same thing about me, but you don't really know a lot of my context. You don't know my life, But I remember at that introduction that you're talking about, I shared. I went to the front of the room and I shared, and again, I didn't intend to share. It was just kind of a spontaneous, decision to do it, and I do remember being emotional. I can't quite remember what I said, but you asked me the question. What was life before? What was life like before Landmark?
Before you do that, Alan,
Yeah.
I want to recite to you what I remember you saying.
Yeah.
And it was something along the lines of, I was in South Africa in the 80s, and forgive the detail, this is what I remember. I was deployed to, Southwest Africa as it was then, Namibia or Angola, both Angola. And you said something along the lines of, I saw and did horrendous things.
Yes.
And I slept with a gun under my pillow. And this might be my memory. I slept with a gun under my pillow, and I was waiting for the opportunity to blow my brains out. And what I learned on this course was I didn't need to do that because stuff happened, and I get to choose a different meaning out of what happened, and here I am, and that was what I remember.
Yeah. I did. Angola was it affected me, and obviously, as I say, I can't quite remember exactly what I said, but stuff just came out of me, and I remember when I first started speaking, I had the same kind of feedback as that. It was like verbal diarrhea. I had great passion, great intensity, but no structure. And that's probably what would have happened. It just kind of came out of me because, stuff had been buried inside of me for a long, long time. And Angola was, a very significant event in my life. And it really affected me in a deep way. And I had been burying that, trauma and that pain under alcohol and drugs for a long time by that stage. And, during that period, I was still getting high on a regular basis, really. But what Landmark did is it really began to give me an idea and an understanding of how a significant emotional event can shape your psychology by the meaning you give it. And that evening, obviously, I remember it was a very powerful evening and very emotional for me to share because I was terrified to share. I remember whenever I used to share, my legs were shaking like jelly, but I knew that I just even not even maybe consciously aware of it, just maybe my higher self just knew that I needed to purge, you know. So thank you for saying that that had such a significant effect on you. And you know, you say about the connection earlier, you said about the connection you have with me. And listen, I've always felt connected to you because I remember the conversations that we had in the beginning, you know. And so I haven't forgotten those conversations, and also conversations around South Africa and going back there to make a difference, you know, and helping to set up Landmark there in 1998, October, the very first forum that we ran in Cape Town, which was, you know, such a powerful weekend. So yeah, there's a lot we can talk about, you know. So that was a powerful evening.
I just want to say, just for feedback as well, your share in my memory was extremely eloquent and structured, even though it might just occur to you as like, and I think that's the point when we speak away from the mind and into the heart, it just perfection. That's what I remember.
Yeah. Well, I think you know, it's interesting because as a kid, I had very low self-esteem, and I was, you know, very conscious of who I was, and I was bullied a lot. So I learned how to make people laugh at a young age and I realized if I could make them laugh, that was my winning formula. If I made people laugh, then, you know, I would be accepted. And however, I was terrified, you know, to speak out in public and to say anything. And then I found something when I went back to South Africa, and I know I'm jumping around here, but it all ties together. I found something when I went back for my mother's service after my mother passed, and I was going through her stuff and I was collecting photographs, and I found something in a drawer which I only opened, an envelope which I only opened 6 months later when I got back to the UK, and in that envelope was something from 1973, and I would have been, you know, 7 at the time, and I had been entered into the South African public speaking competition. And at 7, I got an A+, and in big writing, it said, "Big, bold, beautiful voice, has great promise." And I don't remember that at all. And I forgot all about that. And then, you know, much later on, you know, in my 30s, when I started speaking and learned how to, you know, present and speak, and conquered my fear of what people thought of me, you know, and then much later after that, found this envelope with this thing inside. I thought, oh my God, you know what I mean? So obviously it was always on the cards, really. So I appreciate you're acknowledging my eloquence in that. But when I speak, you know, I've always been a good storyteller. I can tell a great story. I've always been able to entertain people with a story, and I'm very, as you say, very vivid in my descriptions. And, you know, I can really weave an emotional roller coaster and take people on a ride. And when I am talking about things, especially things that have really, you know, impacted me at a deep level, I don't really think about it. You know, I just tell it as I experienced it. I tell it as I can see it in my mind. I tell it how it was for me in the moment. And sometimes, you know, people, they say, wow, you know, there's a lot of detail there. And I say, well, you know, people love detail. That's why we go to the movies. That's why we read books. That's why we listen to people, because people love stories, because in stories, people get inspired. And so that wasn't my intention when I stood up, you know, in that introduction. It wasn't my intention, you know, whenever I put my hand up. I just knew there was something inside of me, I think, that just knew that I had to get something out because it was in the way, really. And I'm grateful, really. So it's led me to, you know, to this moment in time, really. And I've been able to tell my story around the world, which has been a blessing.
Alan, I've got a question. I mean, I've got loads of questions, right?
Yeah.
But what kind of led you to actually be in the Landmark Forum? I mean, was that
that's a good question. And you know, I was seeing somebody at the time, and I was madly in love. And I went to pick her up one night in where they used to do the forum, and they used to do the introductions in
Royal National Hotel.
Royal National Hotel. There you go. Just right next to Russell Square Tube, right? And I pulled up outside the hotel, and she jumped in, and she was on fire. She said, "Oh my God, I've just been to this introduction about the Landmark Forum." She said, "We're going to do it." I signed us up both. So I said, "Cool. I'm in." If she was doing it, I'd do it, because I'd do anything that she did, right? Because I was in love. And so I found myself in the forum in April 94 in the Hilton Hotel in Paddington. And I didn't know what to expect. I was just there because she had, you know, enrolled us. And David Ure walked to the front of the room, and within 5 minutes, I thought, wow, I want to do what this guy does. You know, I want to do this. And by that stage, I'd already been reading, you know, since 88, 7 months out of the military. my friend introduced me to personal development. He was an angel in my life. He's still an angel for me. He unfortunately left this earth several years later. He was killed in a car accident. However, he's been with me many times on stage. I felt his presence. He was the one who introduced me to psychology, personal development in 1988, in July. And so I had already been reading, etc., and I already absorbed a lot of content. And I was sitting in the forum with David Ewer, 5 minutes on stage. I thought, wow, this guy's amazing. This guy is incredible. I want to do what he does. And as I said that, I heard a voice in my head saying, you can't do that. Who's going to listen to you? You got nothing to say. Who are you? Who do you think you? And so it was, 6 years later that I actually stepped on a stage for the first time.
Wow.
But landmark, that forum in 94, I remember, we can say, when we going through those moments, we say, wow, it's accidental that I'm here, right? And people use the word coincidence, and they associate coincidence as accidental, but really coincide comes from mathematics, and for two things to coincide at a particular point in time, a million things have to happen in order for that to happen. And so when I look at that, I think that obviously that's just synchronicity, like everything that has happened in my life, synchronicity that I found myself in that room. And then on the second day, David was talking to a young man about my age, I reckon. And this guy was talking to David about his tempestuous and really volatile relationship.
You said tempestuous and volatile relationship with
his father. And that's when I started to listen. I thought, wow, this guy's talking about my relationship with my father. And I listened to David talk to this guy about his relationship with his father, and there was a really, intense relationship. Because this guy was really stuck in his story and stuck in his perception about his dad. And I began to listen, and it just really dropped in at a deep level. And I thought, wow, you know what? I've been making my father wrong my whole life, since I was a boy. And I just got up without even thinking. I just got up and I walked out the room, and I walked to a payphone in the reception of the hotel, and I phoned my dad reverse charges. And like I used to phone my parents reverse charges in those days. And I heard the operator say, will you accept this call from the UK? And my dad said, yes. And I said, Dad, it's me. I said, listen, please don't say anything. I just want to tell you something. Please listen. And I just opened up and I just told him on the phone. I just said, listen, I'm sitting in this room with a couple of hundred people, and I'm listening to somebody talk about their relationship with their dad. And it just hit me that I have been making you wrong my whole life. And I have kept you out of my life because I have called you all kinds of names. And I told him what I thought of him, and I told him everything. I just said, I thought you were an absolute cunt. I just thought you were, a total arsehole. You just completely curbed my enthusiasm, and didn't want me to have any fun. And you were so strict, and, and I just really told him how it made me feel as a kid growing up. And I said, and I realized now that actually you were doing the best you could, and you were just trying to give me a good laugh, and you were just doing what you thought you had to do as a father. And, and I realized that everything that I have thought about you was just a perception, and it's flawed. And I was completely transparent and vulnerable, and I spoke for probably about 40 minutes, right? 45 minutes. And when I finished, and I said, that's all I have to say. And I just thank you for listening. And, and it was quiet on the other end of the line for a long time. And I could hear my dad was emotional. And I'd never really seen my dad emotional. I can't even remember ever seeing my dad emotional before that point, really, because we had an estranged relationship. And I had an estranged relationship with both my parents, really. I was an only child. And they were on their second marriage. And I was born, when they were already in their 40s, early 40s. I think my mother was 40 already, or 41 when she had me. And my father was 5 years older than her. And he was quiet for a long time. And then when he spoke, I could hear he was speaking through, really emotion, a lot of emotion. And he told me how grateful he was for what I told him. And then he just told me, how much he loved me. And he told me that, he just only ever wanted to do the best for me, and he was doing the best he could, except we ended up having this incredible conversation for about 90 minutes, and I'd never had a conversation like that with my dad ever. And I fell in love with my dad in that phone call, and gosh, I feel emotional now because just yesterday I was just going through a lot of photographs, just as it happens, because I'm just clearing out a lot of stuff. And I was going through these photographs of me as a baby, and I saw photographs of me with my dad, and I don't remember anything about my youth, those early years. I don't have any memories of me sitting on my dad's shoulders or hanging out with my dad in the pool. And yeah, I saw these photographs of me as a kid, as a baby with my old man, and with my mother, and it was it was just amazing to go through these photographs. And now, just to remember that phone call with my dad and how we just connected in that phone call, because I just got up and walked out that room and decided to phone my dad and tell him, what an arsehole that I had been in our relationship, and how I'd kept him at a distance because I thought he was, trying to stop me from enjoying my life. And really, my parents was just doing the best they could to give me a good education and to give me a good life. And that's what Landmark did for me. That's my first forum. And if I always tell people, even now, if people ask me about Landmark, and I still talk about Landmark, and people ask me about Landmark, and I always say, listen, if you get the chance to do it, because even if you get one thing, like I got that one thing, that relationship with my father, which really expanded into the relationship with both my parents, and just expanded into my relationship with everyone else around me, and especially with myself. I think, if you get one thing like I did, then that's worth doing, and that really.
I just want to acknowledge something, Alan. In the process of going into the Landmark Forum, and you sat there, I think, what was that, day one, day two? I think you said day two.
It was day two of, I remember, Saturday.
Yeah, halfway through the 3 days, and you've had a life-changing, life-impacting breakthrough, and you haven't even spoken to anyone. You haven't got up, you haven't shared nothing, just listening, and that's part of the special conditions of the Landmark Forum, is what we would call the group dynamic and the sharing.
Yes.
Such a powerful that it got you up, and you was on the phone with your dad for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And what a result off the bat. Like you said, and I said to people, I got something like that on Saturday afternoon. I got racism complete. I've never experienced racism ever again, ever. I'm not saying people are not racist. I'm saying I don't experience racism. And I would say just that one thing was more, and I'd say that when you put yourself into it and you really take the work, it's an embarrassment of riches, isn't it? It's an embarrassment of riches. What a profound impact. Just that one breakthrough. And I bet after that is like the dam bursting, and it's just a torrent of breakthroughs after that. So
yeah.
What an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And what I love is, you are a magnificent storyteller, man. I was like, when you said you were going to go out and call your dad, and by the way, what came up from is, didn't one of the assistants come up and say, no, you can't leave the room?
You can't leave.
Like, fuck off. I'm leaving the room.
If anybody tried to stop me, I don't remember, but.
I've got another curiosity, Alan, if you don't mind me asking. Joining the army. For me, it's been something I haven't had to do. I never considered it was something I'd ever do. I've got to an age in my life where I probably would never be asked to join the army. And I live in North Cyprus, where there was conflict here until 1974, and a lot of blood has been spilt here, and I'm sure there's blood's been spilt all over the world for all sorts of reasons.
And still currently a massive military presence, by the way.
Yeah, big military presence here, and tensions are rising. What had you join the army? I mean, what frame of mind were you in? What made you? Because I know there's a lot of television advertising, film glamorization of joining the army, be the best you can be, explore the world, and all these ways that people were kind of conditioned into joining. I'm wondering, what was your personal experience? What led you to join, and how long were you in the army? What was your role?
I had to, Erkan.
Were you conscripted?
It was compulsory.
Oh.
Yeah, it was compulsory. It was compulsory in South Africa. Obviously, guys, there were lots of guys who avoided the army and did what they could to do it. One option was you could go to university after school and study at university, and then after university you still had to go to the army. But the difference is, if you went into the army with a university degree, you would go in and you would be able to go into officers training, and you would then get rank. You would be able to get rank quicker. I didn't get the marks to go into university. I got an E for enough when I left school. I just made it. I wasn't academically minded. Telling you that I went through these photographs yesterday, I went through a whole lot of stuff that I'd collected from my mother from my parents' place. You know, when I went back to South Africa after my mother's service, and I was going through. I found the stuff from my school. You know, the reports and that. And it's, you know, Alan's very slow. Alan is very distracted. Alan is, you know,
Could do
he's
better.
not interested. And so, you know, because I was just always in my imagination, and I had a lot of energy, you know, and so. But yeah, I had to go into the army. Okay, you know, my father was in the military. My grandfathers, my uncles, you know, every man in my family, I think, went to the military. It was just something you had to do. So, what frame of mind was I in when I went in? I was anxious. I was, you know, I was dreading it, really. You know, I kind of put it out my mind to the last minute because, you know, after school I had a good 6-week holiday before my day of arrival at this camp in Durban on the beach, where everybody had to arrive, and then we get put on a train and go off to the different places where we were being sent. And when that day came, and I just thought, okay, cool, here we go, you know. I mean, and then my father, my father, when he dropped me, he said, "Listen, son, keep your head down, do what you're told, come back alive." So, you know, I got on this. I arrived there, and there was all these guys, you know, and you know, hundreds of young guys, and I connected with a few guys from Durban on the train. And on the way up on the train, I made some friends, and I ended up staying with some of those guys right throughout my 2 years, which was fantastic. But yeah, it was, man. I'm just thinking now about the emotions that I went through. Yeah, it was feeling anxious, feeling dread, you know, not knowing what I was in for, but then also just realizing that, you know, now I'm here. I'm gonna just just do it. You know what I mean? Just get your head down, just do it. And that's what I did. I was already fit. You know, I played sport my whole life. I surfed all my young life. You know, so when I went in, I was already fit. These guys that I met, we made a decision that all of us were going to try and get into the paratroopers. So we had to go through this particular training or this particular application process, physical than that. You know, I ran my first 2.4-kilometer run with webbing, full webbing, and a rifle in 7 minutes. Just under 8 minutes. And I beat the South African marathon champion. He came in behind me. And
wow.
Yeah, but I didn't get through because of the psychology. I didn't have the right psychological mind frame, according to them. But yeah, going in there, it was, wow, man, apprehensive. Yeah. And getting sent to Northern Cape in Uppington, as hot as Hades there, big spiders and terrible, scary corporals. Yeah, it was crazy. I remember getting off the train, and just as you get off the train, you just hear the shouting, you know, just, oh man, everything's in Afrikaans. And it was intense, man. From the word go, the moment we stepped off that train in Uppington.
Do a quick enactment of it in Afrikaans, so that in the way of a corporal.
Oh man, my Afrikaans is not so good anymore. But as soon as we got off the train, it was like, "All right, you actors, get over there." Just, you know, I mean, in Afrikaans, it's like, I can't even speak Afrikaans anymore. So because I haven't spoken it for so long, and I can barely understand it like I used to. I used to be, and to think I used to be bilingual, but you know, it was along the lines of, listen, no, shut the fuck up, get over there. And from now on, I am your mother and your father, and you are nothing. You are less than the afterbirth that comes out of your mother. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And yeah, it was intense from day one, and it was intense throughout my whole 2 years. You know, and it was a 2-year conscription, to answer your question, Erkan. And you know, I was deployed in various different places, and there were times when we had a lot of fun, for sure. And I'm grateful for those times because they got us through the tough times. But the tough times were really tough, man, like really tough. And you know, Angola was horror, man.
Was South Africa at war with Angola? I mean, sorry for
no. Angola, you know, it was a war that went on for 25 years, you know, and you know, millions of people died, but Russia was involved. You know, Russians, you know, were involved because they wanted to, you know, Angola is very rich in minerals, and you know, South Africa was supporting the liberation army there, and So when we went to battle, and South Africa had been in Angola covertly for many years, and nobody knew about it. And there were a lot of excursions over the border from Angola into Namibia. So Namibia really requested South Africa's support, and so we were into Angola for many years covertly. And then, even when I got to London in 1990, in 1991, it was on the BBC News that South Africa was in Angola, and it was all over the international news. But we had been there for a long time. But in '87, in October of '87, and we got there in May of '87, and we were there until December, the 12th of December. And in October of '87, South African Defence Force had their biggest battle in their history. And I was in that battle, and we were at war, for the entire time we were there for 7 months, and just about every other day, interacting with the enemy. But that particular October '87, where we just it was insane. It was intense. MiG-27s dropping 250-pound bombs on us. G5, G6 cannons, which South Africa actually developed and sold to the whole world. One of the best field cannons ever made to this day, probably 40-kilometer pinpoint accuracy. And those things were firing from way back behind us, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right, for months, just shelling the enemy. The army, the Angolan military force, the Russian force, they were 55,000 strong, and they'd recruited a lot of the locals. And they'd been dug into these tunnels and in these underground bunkers, and they had Russian T-55 tanks and all kinds of the best grade weapons, etc. But South Africa, we were 5,000. We were only 5,000, and South Africa had the best military, one of the best militaries in the world at that time. Now our military is a complete shambles, but if I could have avoided that, I would have. However, that has become something that really has allowed me to change a lot of lives in terms of helping a lot of veterans since then. So I always look at that as, as just part of my dharma. It's been part of my journey. It's part of my soul's journey. Nothing happens by accident. So I'm so grateful I survived that, because a lot of my friends never came home, and, I had to do horrific things, and things that haunted me for many, many years. And I saw terrible things, and, war is, it's the worst, man. Saving Private Ryan is probably the closest movie that comes to it, so graphically done. But even then, it's a movie, and it's dramatized, and it's Hollywood. War is far worse than you can imagine. And it's just, it affects you. I'm very grateful, I'm very grateful that my journey took the way it did, and I found personal development, and I had a lot of angels entered my life, after the army, and really helped to direct me, and helped me to find my way to healing processes and modalities that really helped me to turn that meaning into something more positive and more powerful. And then when I found spiritual psychology, it really helped me. But that 2 years was tough, man. And then obviously the years after that, I spent 18 years drunk and high, and I had nightmares for 9 years straight, and I was drinking myself into unconsciousness because I just didn't want to have these nightmares. And when I was unconscious, infused by alcohol, then I wouldn't dream. I wouldn't have them. But yeah, it was rough, man. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Alan. I mean,
and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for it, man. I have no regrets.
But that's the benefit of transformation and healing and work. I mean, I can only imagine the amount of work that's taken to be able to sit here and declare that and share that so vividly in a way that, mate, when you speak, it's like I'm.
Yeah, it's been since '88, July of '88. I've been, just absorbing information and just doing things and practices and processes, and it's been a daily process, and it's taken a long time, to get to the point. And it was, I didn't talk about it for a long time, and then when I began to just talk about it, then I just realized, okay, cool, this is a way to really heal.
To let it, rather than it's gripping you, you're now letting
exactly,
it go.
Yeah.
So in terms of breakthroughs, Alan, Dad was first. What was the biggest completion with that area of your life for you, as you can describe it?
For that era, for the biggest completion for me, man. Well, it's an evolution, isn't it? Are you talking specifically landmark related, or are you talking about just in terms of my evolution from
Yeah,
the beginning of my journey?
I think I was talking landmark related, but you can
Yeah,
answer it in any way that you feel where the biggest
I have a
release.
specific question if it's helpful, Alan.
yeah.
Because so many mirrors in what you I had a very, very similar experience with my dad on the forum. The first breakthrough I remember was around racism, because I grew up in Durban as well. And I'm curious to know if anything came up for you around racism. And yeah, because for me, what I recognized is I'd become an inverted racist. So I'd become like white guilt, like, oh, shame, these poor black people, and are
I
they so
remember you
good?
told me that.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you have a kind of completion racism story, not to manufacture it, but if it was
No,
there.
it's very lucky actually, because I the first 6 years of my life, Erkan, you won't know this, and Sai, you may have forgotten this. I don't know if I've even told you, or maybe you never heard this, but when I was born in Parklands Hospital in Durban, my parents were living in Princess Mansions in Masonic Grove, right behind Addington Hospital, right next door to Point Road Police Station. And Point Road Police Station was responsible for the whole of South Beach. And if you went down to the end of Point Road, away from the center of city with the sea, to the end of Point Road, you would get to the docks, right? And you could go all the way around and go to the harbor mouth, and you could walk all the way around to the end of the jetty, and you could watch the big tanker ships coming into Durban Harbor. And I did that a lot as a kid. But at the end of Point Road, there were these dormitories, and in these dormitories were these black men slept every night, Monday to Thursday night. On a Friday, they would get on the buses, go home to their farms and their families, and give their in the early hours of Monday morning. And this police station was responsible for that area. And in those dormitories, in the evenings, there was a lot of drinking, a lot of fighting. And this police station would, there would be a lot of commotion in the police yard, which was right next door to the courtyard where I played in as a 4-year-old kid, 3-year-old kid when I came back from Claire Ellis Brown Nursery. And I remember one day just hearing someone scream, continued, and I went over to the end of the courtyard, climbed on the bins, climbed on the wall, and looked through a gap in the wall that really nobody else knew existed except me. But I couldn't see a lot, but I could see enough to terrify the life out of me, and I was left by a white policeman. And I tell you, I was lucky because my parents were they weren't racist at all, right? They were kind people, both of them. My father was very kind, gregarious, very, everyone loved him, very popular. And they always told me, he said, just never, you don't ever want to judge anybody by the color of their skin. You always want to judge people by their character, always give people the benefit of the doubt. And when I grew up, I was aware of racism. I could hear it everywhere. And I didn't like it. It made me uncomfortable. And, I remember when I was doing regression therapy and this thing came back to me, I was sitting on that wall looking over the yard there at 4 years old, and God appeared to me. And I was terrified by what I was seeing. And I didn't tell anybody about it because I thought, as a kid, when we see things like that, we always think it's our fault, because that's what we do as young children. We so connected to everything, we think everything's us. And God appeared to me and he said, you see what you're seeing here? He said, you're going to transmute fear into love. This is your purpose on earth. Don't forget. I said, I won't forget. And I forgot, obviously, because we forget, right? We get stuck in our ego and we forget. And later on, I found my way back to my purpose. I was lucky. I always had a lot of love in me. However, I just had these experiences that really affected me and really just, traumatized me and stunted my self-esteem and I was very self-conscious. I believed a lot of really negative things about myself that really shaped who I was as a young kid. However, I loved people and I loved life, and I watched my dad interact with people, and my dad was very good with people, and so was my mother. So I had two really great role models, and they had a great relationship. And so I had that. I didn't have anything around racism. And whenever I heard it, it made me very uncomfortable. And I called out a lot of my friends when I could see them doing things or saying things about people. And one particular thing stands out of my mind when we're in, watching the Natal Sharks play rugby one day. And this was in 1988 or 89. And we always used to sit in the same place every home game, a whole bunch of us. And this young black guy came up the stairs, and he was selling ice cream, saying, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream. And one of my friends said, why are you screaming? You're black. And it hurt me. And I looked at this young black guy, and I could see, that it hurt him. And I turned to my mate. I said, what the fuck, man? Why are you saying that? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, that's a fucking human being, man. How do you think he feels? And all my other mates looked at me and said, hey, fucking shut up, man. Because it's when I got to England and I looked back at South Africa and I thought, wow, what a fishbowl we live in there. You don't really know you're in water, right, as a fish until you're out of water, right? So you just kind of grow up in that. But I didn't have that really, Si. So my completion really, I can't really say my completion is still unfolding. I don't think we're really ever complete, but for me, it was about, I think it was probably going back to Cape Town in 1998 and helping to create the first forum there and being in that room and watching Indian people, black people, racists, ex-policemen, a farmer who had 30 workers there, his whole black staff, 30 of his black staff, and people talking about, just transforming. I cried for 3.5 days sitting in the back of that room and watching people transform. And that was a beautiful completion for me, because I had a lot of stuff around South Africa, and then I had other completions when I went back to South Africa and started doing my own work there. I think I got to 1999. I was going through the IFLP, and I was going back to South Africa and doing introductions for the forum, and yet I was still unhappy. I was still using drugs. I was still out of integrity, and I dropped off the IFLP. Actually, I went into the office and Dilip was there. Dilip and gosh, who else was there? Who used to run the office?
Nick Andrews.
With Dilip in the office there in Houston. And I walked in and I said, guys, listen, I got to step off this program. And they said, why? What? And I said, man, I'm so out of integrity, and I just can't continue this program being out of integrity. These things I've got to clean up, and then I'll come back and do this again maybe another time. I was in this country illegally. I was a drug addict. I was partying from Thursday to Monday morning every weekend. And I was suicidal, man. I was unhappy, man. But I had a really, really good mask, I had a really good winning formula. And and I was just desperate to change my life, and it wasn't changing. And then, so I'd been out of Landmark for a little while, and I was working at Credit Suisse, and that's when I saw an advert for Tony Robbins, and that's when my life took a different direction, Yeah. So I don't know if that really answers your question, Erkan, but Landmark, I learned a lot at Landmark. I loved it. I met Werner Erhard, I was very blessed to meet Werner. I reviewed the forum, several years later. I took a friend with me, and he was doing it for the first time, a couple of friends actually, and I was reviewing it, and David Sherman was leading it. I think David Sherman led it. Yeah. And I loved it, and I think that was my first time I really connected with David Sherman, and Werner popped in. I don't know if maybe David can corroborate this, but I remember meeting Werner. He was there for a while, and he was a very impressive individual. But that was kind of, that was the end of my Landmark road, really. And then I went in a new direction. Yeah.
Alan, you shared something on the group early on. I think it was your first interaction on the group, and you were in a bit of a what looked like a bit of a dark space or something space, and you didn't say what it was, and maybe you want to, maybe you don't want to. But what I loved about what you were saying, because you shared with me when I heard that introduction about what happened in Angola and so on and so forth. And there's a neat little part of my identity that goes, oh, well, that was good. That was complete and done and dusted. And it's like, and you were saying, you'd had that breakthrough, lots of breakthroughs. And thank you, you were still you were still a drug addict. You were still a this. And like, there's a distinction that's been brought up in the group recently about the distinction between completion and healing. And it's a really good one. It's been on a lot of my mind. It's like you completed there on that Tuesday night, and then there was other stuff to do. And so and I think isn't it right to say that transformation / healing is an ongoing process that we never really get to the end?
100%. Healing is continual, man, because when we think we've healed something, the basement is still full of junk, man. We've been collecting stuff since we were in our mother's womb. We have past life stuff. We've got the collective unconscious. It's an ongoing process. Healing is about becoming whole, and you're never quite whole. you know, and that's okay because that's evolution. So yeah, my healing continued long after that process, and it's still continuing. And even recently, as you said, I shared in the group because my friend, a good, very close friend of mine, took his own life in January, and it really broke my heart. And I only found out about it in March, and we had been talking every day or just about every other day up until January. And 3 days after I spoke to him, he hung himself, and I knew that he was not in a great place. I knew that he was considering doing that. And so, but that also just really woke me up to the fact that I've been kind of hiding my light recently because of what happened to me financially in 2022, where I lost a lot of money, and it also cost a lot of close people in my life a lot of money because they trusted me, even though they went in with their eyes wide open, and I told them to do their own due diligence. People still trusted what I said. And so I had a lot of stuff there that was coming to the surface again that I had been working on for a while, but it just kind of reemerged. And I think it was triggered by the fact that my friend took his life. And I thought, well, if I had been at my top of my game, perhaps, because when I'm really at the top of my game, present and living my purpose, then I can really, I've changed a lot of lives, and I really am able to serve people. And I just really felt that I didn't serve my friend because I wasn't in a great place. And so that share was about that. And I'm happy to tell you and honest to tell you that I'm still not in a great place in terms of my finances, because it's just been, I've done so well in my life, and yet I still, every now and again, I bump into the ceiling, and then I kind of regress a bit, and so there's still work for me to do, and I still feel that my best work is ahead of me. So I'm optimistic about that. And I just keep showing up in the best way possible on a daily basis, and trust that God's guiding me, and I just keep doing what I'm here to do, which is to share love, spread love, and be love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Alan, I've just got to say, I just love listening to you, man. I'm really,
Amazing.
I don't think I've talked any less on any of the podcasts than this one. But what I would like to comment,
Thank you.
I mean, pulling LOL up and putting it out there, life after landmark, and it was a way of us reconnecting with, uh, you know, graduates from decades,
Yeah.
graduates from the decades. And one of the things that's been opening up for me, and with different conversations and various, I mean, with Sai, and I can mention, but it's that we have got so much a mountain of value. That's a commonly sort of like articulating of the value that we've created and the experience. And I think there's a book by Sam Keen called Fire in the Belly, on being a man. And he talks the metaphor of the fire, how it starts off really slow and then it builds up and it gets really out of control, probably the wild years. And then there comes a time in a man's life that they become glowing embers. And I just see not just you, and it is an acknowledgement of you, but also it's acknowledgement of the work and the consistency and the time that we've put in to be accomplished in our commitment to make that difference, to make an impact, to share the message, what we've learned. And I'm just so excited. I don't know where LOL's going. And some people have been asking us, what's the vision, what's the passion, I'm like, no. Let's just get reconnected and related, and I just do you know what? I just want to share this with you, Alan. I'm glad that someone like you is out there in the world. I'm actually not only glad, I think it's a necessity of our time that there's pre-digital humans that have messed up, that have had horrendous experiences, that have overcome, that are ongoingly healing and transforming, because it's an ongoing process. And what a validation of our little vision for LOL, that you being here. And I really want to acknowledge you for that, and thank you for being out there in the world so authentically, and
Thank you, bud.
it's just beautiful, and I'm actually quite moved.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Erkan. It's awesome, bud. Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. It's a very interesting time we're living in, and social media has given people a platform to really voice their angers and their frustrations and all their isms, and we need people who are coming from a place of love and coming from the heart, and it's more important than ever before now. And yeah, it's a good time to be alive. It's a great time to be
I think
alive.
we're just getting warmed up.
I think so. I think so. I shared, when I found out about my friend in March, and I hadn't been online for a long time, and I was inspired to just go online and just share something. And I talked about how, I'm coming to my 60th birthday at the end of this year. And I can't believe it, when I think about it. And I just don't feel it. And, it doesn't, I think 60 years. And then I think, well, you know what, that's just chronologically in this body. And on the 27th of December will be the first day of the second 60 years of my life, because in 2021, I wrote down in my book, I'm going to live to 120. And I calculated how many hours I had left on this earth if I was living to 120. At the time, I was 55. And yeah, so the best is ahead of us, my man. And I think, this group is full of wonderful people who are doing wonderful things to really inspire other people who are living their truth and living authentically, and just demonstrating what it is to live a life that's authentic and, led by love, really. And I think
Yeah.
that's the most important thing. I've always been led by love. And I think that's the most important thing on this earth, is to be an example of love in action. And that's what my goal is, so I appreciate what you said. So thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So I think we should wrap it up. And I think there's probably a part 2 in this, because I don't think we've even scratched the surface.
There's a part 2 for sure.
Definitely a part 2. Si, do you want to sum it up and wrap it up?
Yeah, I want to just I've got some other questions, but I can save for another time. Do you have any?
Because I didn't even tell you what happened after 99, after leaving
Yeah, no, we
Landmark.
haven't even got into this millennium.
When I got sober, I got sober and I changed everything, And I went back to South Africa. That was a great completion, going back to South Africa. Actually, to come back to your question, okay, a great completion, going back to South Africa in 2001 after the 9/11 event, November 2001, and going back there with clarity of mind, specifically on purpose to go and complete my healing with my relationship with my country and what I had done in Angola, and also to be part of the transition that was taking place in South Africa, and I had 7 amazing years where I changed thousands and thousands of lives in that country, and very proud of that fact, and then came back to England in 2008, and then I've had a wonderful journey. It's been, life is a roller coaster, you know what I mean? And so that's why you must never get too down when you're in the valley, because you know that you're going to be going up soon, and then when you're at the top, you should never get too excited, because what's coming next is a drop, because that's how life is. I think we are constantly on this hero's journey that Joseph Campbell talks about. It's just, life is life, and we got to make the most of it. And like, we have got these great tools. We're very lucky. We've been on this journey, all of us. We've got these great tools, and those tools help us to navigate those valleys and help us to, keep our ego in check when we are riding the highs.
So I've got a question. I feel like I'm going to finish this off. I've got a question. Like, what do you see is possible for us in LAL? I mean, just as not like I'm holding you to anything or counting. Just like, because we're still working it out. And I said to Si, look, I really don't want to. I want to let it happen organically and see who turns up, what they're interested in, what can we harness, and what direction, if it requires that or not. I don't know. But what are your thoughts?
I think the possibilities are endless, really. But I think what's possible with LAL is you're going to inspire people for sure. People are going to be inspired to look at things, with a fresh perspective, because, like it or love it, like it or not, we all get into lulls, we all get into areas where we forget things. We all get back in our story sometimes. We all get back on our horse sometimes. We all get back into judgment sometimes. And so I think you'll be able to inspire a lot of people. And I think people who have not done Landmark, if they watch any of these podcasts, they'll be inspired to inquire what Landmark can do for their own lives. So, the possibilities, I think, take care of themselves if we have the right intentions. And I think your intentions are good. Your intentions are to allow people to reconnect, which is beautiful, and to allow people to share what's been going on in their lives after Landmark. And, some of that's going to be great, and some of that's not going to be so great, because not everybody is doing life at the highest level all the time. It just doesn't work like that. It's life. It does not work like that. We all are constantly coming up against our own self-imposed limitations, And if we're not doing that, then we're not growing. So, it's about growing and, inspiring people and allowing the message to go where it goes, and it'll land in the right ears at the right time.
Goes where it goes. Exactly. Great.
So there's a final question that we've got for you, Alan.
Yes.
And what I would like to do is schedule a second session. Maybe let's strike while the iron's hot. I'd love to do it. For example, next Friday we'll be in touch on the group, and Erkan and I can speak in the meantime. But I'd like to keep the momentum going because there's plenty more of real juicy stuff here. And then one other question: do you have a family? Do you have kids? Do you have a partner? Do you have?
Yes, I do. I have 2 beautiful kids, bud. I have 2 amazing kids. I love my kids, man. I was looking at photographs of them yesterday when they were babies. My son's 24, my daughter's 21. Daniel is 6'2". He's just an amazing young man. He is going to be a beautiful young man. He is a beautiful young man already, but I'm so excited for his life. Amber is just a beautiful soul. She's a gorgeous girl. She's got a great sense of humor. She's very smart and sassy, and we got 2 great kids, Maxine and I. And I was telling Erkan before you showed up, Si, I got divorced in 2015. Maxine is a phenomenal human being. We divorced in an amicable fashion without any lawyers involved, and we made sure that it was all about the kids, and we made sure that those kids felt loved in spite of the fact that we all weren't going to live under the same roof anymore. And we did the work that was necessary so that our kids could benefit in the process. And so I've got 2 great kids. I've got a fantastic ex-wife who I'm a big fan of. And yes, I have a partner that I'm in love with. And she's a beautiful woman. She's got 2 beautiful boys herself. And they are 11 and 9. And I am very blessed, very grateful.
Beautiful. Si, did we have a question from our last guest?
Oh, flip. Okay, okay, so we have a question somewhere.
Yeah.
It was from Jackie. It was from Jackie to you, not knowing who that next person was going to be, and then a question from you to the next person. So let's do that second one first. What's a question, while I look for the other one, what's a question that you have for the next guest?
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. Well, do I get to hear the question from Jackie?
Yeah, when I found it.
Oh, okay. Okay. What's a question I have for the next guest? Wow. Gosh. That's interesting, isn't it? That's an interesting question. If I had a question for the next guest, what would it be?
I've remembered it.
Well done, Si. Seamless.
Ask me the question, and then
where could play be more present in your life?
Where could play be more present in my life? Man, I play all the time, buddy. I love play. I am play. That's why I'm so young. I'm a little boy in a big body. Play, gosh, man. I do play everywhere I can, man. I think that you should be playing all the time. I think life is a play, and it's and if it's an authentic play of your inner spirit and your inner child, then it's gorgeous, isn't it? Because then you can interact with everybody in a beautiful way, just like kids do. Like kids interact with each other, just with no filters, no perceptions, no prejudices, etc. They just interact and have fun, and I think that's a great thing. That's
Is there
definitely.
anywhere where you like maybe get on it a bit, or this, or grumpy at the traffic, or
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know.
absolutely. I get on it. I get on it, but I've trained
You're
myself
going
to
to
get
say
off it.
quite a bit, weren't you?
I've trained myself to get off it within 90 seconds. I have a 90-second rule. So I get on it. If I'm on it, I get on it for 90 seconds and it's done. You know what I mean? But more play. Yeah. I think I could introduce more play into maybe into my feminine energy, the feminine side of me. Yeah. Because I often spend, quite a lot in my masculine. And I also have developed my feminine side, a lot over the years. So yeah, it's a great question. Yeah. Now, let me think of a question for the next guest.
Or maybe feel, not think. Up to you.
Yeah, good idea. What's a question for the next guest? Okay. Well, all right. Where could you bring more love into the relationship with yourself?
Mm. Nice. Beautiful stuff.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Do you want to sign this one off, or should I?
You can.
So firstly, I want to say thank you to Alan for joining us. There's definitely a part 2 in this. All you Landmark graduates, if you're watching this, please share it with other graduates. We think it's something special. And share it with people who haven't done Landmark Forum. And come join us in the LAL group. Ask us about that and we can do that. Like and subscribe. And thank you very much for listening in and watching.
Yeah, Alan, you've been an absolute tonic. And I'm going to give you a side message of 3 things I want to speak to you about that came up for me. So yeah, we'll do that. And just huge love and hug to you, my friend.
Well, I'm going to
Thank you.
say, well, I'd like to say to the next guest, top that. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And cut. Wow, that was
so great.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it, man.
no,
Wow,
did
we didn't even, yeah, gosh, there's so much more that we could talk about.
we haven't touched anything.
Yeah.
It's like, we didn't even break the millennium.
I want to tell you, and I haven't got a chance, but I just came to you. I want to tell you something, right? You want to hear something like really phenomenal about how the universe has, and God has a really just a phenomenal sense of humor. I told you about October '87, right? In the biggest battle in South Africa's history, and being in that battle and being in a 6-wheel tank with a 20mm cannon on top, and I had a mortar pipe, a 60mm mortar pipe, and an RPG-7 rocket launcher. That was my weapon, right?
Wow.
And I had an R4 with 6 magazines. I had 12 60mm mortars in my webbing. I had 2 rockets on my back, one in the pipe, and this pipe and this launcher in my hand. I had 25 kilos on me, yeah. And we had to jump out of these rattles every time we encountered the enemy, yeah. And I had to drop these mortars and fire these rockets. It was insane, bro. And then 30 years later, to the month, yes, October 2017, I'm in Angola. Sorry, I'm in Russia. I'm touring 12 cities. I'm speaking, right? 2 cities every weekend. And I'm in the city, and how my day is usually goes, right? I'm on stage at 10, and I speak until 6, and then we have a break. Then we go into a VIP dinner, and then I'm in the VIP dinner till midnight. It's crazy schedule, but it was fantastic. So from 10 till about 11:15, that's my first session, and I've usually told my story by the first tea break, and in the tea break, the interpreter comes up to me with this guy, and he says, "Alan, this guy wants to say something to you." So the interpreter's talking in my ear here, and this guy's standing in front of me, and he says, "Alan, thank you for coming to my country and telling your story so transparently with such vulnerability." He said, "I was in Angola in 1987 fighting against you." And he said, "I'm so glad that you survived those Russian weapons and that you are standing here because you made me really think about my life." He said, "As a military man, He said, I'm still in the military. And he said, I realized my family doesn't even know me because I have a wall around me and I've kept them at an arm's length. And you really inspired me to go back to my family and really start to let them in. And I looked at him and I began to cry. And we ended up hugging and crying, you know, and we're just amazed. 30 years later to the month, man, October 87,
incredible.
October 2017. This happened 3 times in 3 different cities on that tour in the space of how long it took, about 3 months or whatever. It was 4-month tour. And the third time, the guy came up to me and he said, man, I was in Angola in 87. I looked back, I started laughing. He looked at me like he was confused. I said, man, you're the 3rd person in 6 weeks. And I just grabbed him and I hugged him, you know. And only one of them let me take a picture with him because the other 2 were still in the military. But I took that picture, and every now and again I look at that just to remind me that it actually happened. But isn't that phenomenal, right?
That's
and they all said the
incredible.
same. They all 3 said the same kind of thing. You know, my family doesn't know who I am because I've kept them at length because, you know, I don't want to, you know, I'm ashamed and I've got this guilt. But isn't that crazy, right?
It's crazy, man. Can I use this?
Yeah.
We're still rolling.
So glad you're still recording. I thought,
Are you still recording? Okay, yeah, you can use it for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so
Oh
you
man,
know,
Alan.
I look at that experience in 87 as, you know, I turned it into a blessing, you know, because it's led me to so many veterans, man. I've met so many veterans who are just broken, man, broken. And I just remind them, you're not broken, man. You're just wounded, you know, and you need to really let that go and really just forgive yourself. And you know, I had so many, man, I had experiences. I was in Hawaii where I had experiences where I met God, man. I've hung out with God and Jesus several times, you know, in deep meditations, and you know, and just had experiences. I connected with the soldiers I killed in a meditation, and I saw them, and they came to me and they blessed me, they forgave me, man. And it's just like incredible experiences, man, in my processes that have allowed me to really just let go of that guilt and that shame and really just recognize, okay, cool, God put me on this earth for a purpose, and my purpose is to love and be an example of God's love and be a channel of that love, you know, and just share it wherever I go. And so that's what I do. You know, that's my goal. My goal is to be loving and kind to everybody I meet, whoever crosses my path, whoever shows up in front of me, I just love them, you know, and I think that's what we're all here to do. You know? It's important.
What a tonic. What a tonic. And what a message to the world about war and about conflict and the futility of it. And I don't know. I can't find the words to express it. Alan.
Yeah, unfortunately, it makes so much money, man. That's the problem. You see, it makes so much money. And you know, it's messed up, man. You know, have you heard of Dr. David Hawkins? Last thing before we go.
Dr. David Hawkins.
Dr. David Hawkins. He wrote some amazing books, right? He's no longer on this earth. He was a
Power and Force. Power versus Force.
Power versus Force. Fantastic book. And he created a map of consciousness. He was a psychiatrist who was also deeply spiritual. And I think his greatest book is Letting Go, The Art of Surrender. Very powerful book. But you know, he created a map of consciousness, Erkan, where he calibrated the frequency of everything, and especially emotion. And he said that one person who lives in a state of love as consciously as possible with that kind of intention vibrates so high that they counteract 750,000 people who are living below the vibration of, you know, despair, anger, frustration, etc., depression. So that's how important love is, you know, and people forget, you know, how important it is, and what a powerful frequency and vibration it is. And authenticity vibrates even higher than love, because authenticity is related to your pure state of your soul. You know, it's untouched, unblemished, unchanged, you know. So yeah, it's a good reminder for people that
I just want to share something. One of the things I do for work is I work with businesses to create context for their companies. And the culture and values, we do the culture and values, always integrity and And at the end of it, I always sneak in love. Right at the end, I put love, the acceptance of ourselves and others. It's all you need. And they said, well, we don't. I said, no, that's the deal. It's going to go in, whether you want it or not. And later on, you might appreciate it or not. It's going in. And every vision and mission I've ever written, probably quite, I don't know, 30, 40, 100, I don't know. Every one of them has had love at the end of it. And
yeah, it's important.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
Well, listen,
what would it feel like if you put it at the beginning?
Well, I let them do it. I can't remind you, it's their vision and mission, not mine. But I just
that's true.
my
That's true.
I'm just slipping it under the radar. If they don't get it in, I make sure it's in there.
I think more businesses are becoming more open to the idea of spiritual
Yeah, no.
spiritual approach to life, you know.
20 years ago when I'd had it, they'd go, what's that got to do with, I don't know, selling cars or being an accountancy firm? I said, what's it not got to do with it? You know, take that out. What have you got on? I know there's a famous Churchill saying like about taking art out of schools, and he says something like, well, what are you fighting for?
Yeah.
You know, we take art out of schools. And I don't know how true that is, but I think, but listen, we've got to bring this to an end, right? Part 2, watch this space. Alan, thank you so much. Si,
thank you.
Good to see you again, buddy.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. And he's got clothes on. Well done. All right. So if you like this, I hope you do, because we loved it. Like and subscribe, and watch out for the next one. Take care. Bye.
Yeah, just keep this all running.
I'm stopping recording now. At least I'm recorded this time. So what I've noticed, Si, is you don't know the people interviewing, you go ahead, and if we do know them, you still go ahead. So it doesn't seem to matter.
Funny that.